Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with the discussion that I tried to start a few days ago or so with regard to some of those films in the horror film genre that I really love, or regarding which I have a particular fond set of memories for one reason or another. And here is another film that is in that category for me. This is from 1976, and it's directed by Richard Donner, written by David Seltzer, starring, among other great performances, Gregory Peck and Lee Remick, with a phenomenal score by Jerry Goldsmith. This is one of the great horror films, one of the great film scores. And this is, of course, the film, The Omen. This happens to be the Scream Factory Blu-ray that was issued from in North America, so Region A, from a few years back, from this box set, the OMEN Collection Deluxe Edition, which is a splendid, glorious set. Has the five films, right? So Omen, Damien Omen 2, The Final Conflict, Omen 4, The Awakening, and then the remake of The Omen. So hopefully I can talk about some of the other films in this set, but let's begin with The Omen, of course. Now, this is a horror film, and of course I understand that horror films are not for everyone. So if they're not your cup of tea, don't worry about it, and I hope you're well. But for those of you for whom horror is indeed your cup of tea, it is for me, there is, of course, this classic film. It's been spoken about so many times, and it's been listed so many times in the many great horror films, the best horror films ever. It's often listed on those sorts of rankings, etc. So what I might have to say here will certainly not be anything new. In other words, I can't add anything new to the conversation that hasn't already been said about this striking, amazing, fabulous work. But I can just try to associate it with my own personal experiences with this film, which is that this is one of those films also where I can't remember the first time I saw this film. So in other words, I began my associations with this film from a very early age. It would have been VHS and also TV broadcasts, and I'll get to that in a second. But unfortunately, I can't remember a time where I didn't know The Omen, and so I can't pinpoint exactly the moment where I first saw it, and thus I can't explain the feelings that I had when I first saw the film. And I wish I could, because there's something about the overall impact of this, shall I say. And without going into too many details, this is a film that I think the less known about it when you first watch it, the better the experience is potentially. I really mean that. I wish I knew nothing going in and watching it, and then it would have been, and I could have remembered that here. But be that as it may, and there are a number of films like that, as I've mentioned, but be that as it may, this still is so high tension, eerie, creepy, filled with a lot of dread and a lot of shocking set pieces, combined with a really gripping story driven by some really earthy, down-to-earth, quite compelling performances, in particular by Gregory Peck. And he goes through a great arc in terms of what he does and what he believes, what he doesn't believe, and all the circumstances that add up over the course of the film. And the way that he transforms into what he eventually becomes by the end of the film is, I think, a staggering kind of performance, and I think we're with him all the way. But so the performances are great, and also the music is just superb, absolutely superb. So it's just an iconic horror film experience that is that deals, I think, with one of those fundamental stories in in horror films, and in particular in, say, American horror films, which is the idea of good and evil, and that is a story that's rooted in religious connotations, and the story therefore evolves into this kind of sort of heavily religiously themed film, placed in a story that has, I think, a lot of real world like pinnings to it. So that leads into some of the inventive and, in many cases, quite ghastly means by which some of these set pieces are expressed on screen. Overall, what an effective chiller this is. And I must say also that I remember also when I was in England, there was a period in my childhood where I was living in England for a number of years, and I would have been about 6, 7, 8, something like that. But during this time, we were living, I think, in Guildford, Surrey, and in Woking, Surrey for a bit, and maybe around, not, I wouldn't say very close, but I seem to recall maybe we were with friends or something like that, maybe somewhere in the distance, sometime. And our friends, or maybe my mother's friend at the time, and maybe there was a kid there, and I forget the exact situation, but we were in some place, and then the mother very nonchalantly said, "Oh, this is where they filmed some scene in the film The Omen." And my mom said, "Oh, that's nice." And I kind of thought about that and said, "Oh, that's interesting. Oh, this is where they shot The Omen. Oh, wow." And then also around that time in England, if I remember correctly, the films, at the time there were 3 of them, the films were being broadcast on TV. I think it was LWT. And so I was able to record those films. I couldn't watch them as they were broadcast because they were the lateness of the hour, and maybe I had to wake up early the next day or something. But for whatever reason, I couldn't stay up and watch them. But I was able to record them. And so I had the films on VHS tape off of TV broadcast recordings. And so that further helped me associate or watch the films, and I was able to associate a lot of memories with the films based off watching those recordings. Now, to my great delight, the film, as far as I remember it, The Omen, even though it was broadcast on TV, it was more or less intact. In other words, I don't seem to recall any major glaring edits to the film in terms of maybe the intense scenes or the violent scenes or anything like that. So it was pretty much intact, which is great. It wasn't letterboxed. It was, I think, cropped, so we didn't get the full glory of the wideness of the screen. That, of course, came later with my later subsequent views of the film. But still, it was really, I think, very valuable for me to be able to watch that and the other films like this. And I watched that tape over and over and over again. It got a little bit damaged, I think, because of the amount of times I was just watching it, because I was so intent on trying to get all the information I could, because it's a film that has a lot of information directly presented, but also there are a lot of things that are obliquely presented as well. And so I was trying, again, at a very young age, to try to soak up all the information and try to get all the details as much as I could. I didn't do it, but I certainly did my best. And I was also so hypnotized by the way that the music was being used in the film. There's something very layered about the Jerry Goldsmith score. Now, I'm not a musician or a musicologist or any academic with regard to music, so I think my descriptions will be very subpar. But from my, let's say, amateur ear, I can say that the music to me seemed so complex and beautiful in that there were many layers to it. It seemed like it had a soft, intimate tone to it that was then that could then turn very bombastic and still retain a kind of urgency that was still in the classical music edge. And then there were moments too of striking, almost modern synthesizer type of score used. There was a particular moment where we have a close-up of the young boy Damien looking at a dog, and there's a particular type of sound that's used that isn't classical. It's a very odd musical instrument. It sounds almost electronic, and so what I love is I love that the score is more or less bound in these classical instrument terms, and yet there are highlights and layers that go in other places. And I love that in terms of the complex, rich density of the layering of the music of Jerry Goldsmith. And I think this goes on throughout Jerry Goldsmith's work in the Omen films. This is an iconic musical score, and it's regarded as one of the great musical scores, not just of horror cinema, but of cinema in general, as well as Jerry Goldsmith and the pioneering, just brilliant work that he has done. So many iconic themes generated from him, but there is just this feels epic. This feels like, oh my goodness, something bad is about to happen. And in many instances, we have scenes in this film that are like really shocking. But then either before or after, we have moments of music that rise to the occasion and maybe even in some instances exceed. So we have this, and they're never in contravention. They are always working in concert with each other. I'm talking about the image and the music. And so this is a perfect, beautiful blending of sound and the visual, which is the stuff of great films. And here we have what I think is a really great, awesome work. Scary, chilling, some of the details in particular. Just some of the looks that are captured in particular moments. Billy Whitelaw is in it as well. Leo McKern is in it as well. Patrick Troughton is in it as well. So many great, delightful, just underpinnings that highlight the work as a whole. And as I say, as I was getting older, the film had this really interesting impact upon me because I watched the film when I was young. It scared the living daylights out of me. But then as I got older, I was realizing, of course, that I was getting a little bit older or closer in age to the main protagonists of the film, Gregory Peck and Lee Remick. And so I can now watch the film and unlike when I watched it as a young boy, I can now watch it in my older age, shall we say, and begin to better appreciate the couple's perspective and position, and so that also makes the film, I think, quite scary and very much filled with dread in a way that I wasn't able, let's say, to identify when I was much younger. And so, and this is true for a lot of films, but it's particularly true for The Omen. So, a really, still, incredibly effective horror film on me. And I still have the soundtrack somewhere, and I listen to that occasionally. What a great listen, and just oh my goodness, yeah, this is The Omen, and I really want to say that it is a film that lingers on in the consciousness. There are scenes that I think are set up with deceptive simplicity, or seemingly deceptive simplicity, but when they are set in motion like a set of dominoes, the dominoes falling, and the thing just unfurls at its own pace, and then you realize the dread and horror of the situation until it's too late. Absolutely unbelievable. And the sense of dread and fate and foreboding combined with shock and the overall in-your-face impact that is still presented, I think, in a very refined, restrained, and in many ways it's a classy presentation. I think it's really wonderful, and it still affects and chills me to this very day. So this is the film The Omen. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now, and so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. Thank you once again for your time, my dear friends, and cheers.